What happens when live TV turns into a powder keg and the fuse is lit by Whoopi Goldberg herself? The lights blaze, the cameras roll, and the air inside the studio hums with that fake, nervous laughter that always fills the gap before something goes horribly wrong. It's daytime television, glossy and harmless, or so it seems, until Whoopi leans forward, eyes steady, voice calm but laced with danger. Not if you're black. The words land like a slap across the face of America. For a split second, nobody moves. You can actually hear it, the silence. It isn't peace, it's shock, sharp enough to cut the air. A couple of the hosts freeze mid-smile. Someone in the audience lets out a nervous giggle before realizing no one else is laughing. Even the sound engineer hesitates, his finger hovering above the applause button like he's defusing a bomb. Greg Gutfeld blinks. The look on his face says it all. Asterisk. Did she really just go there? Asterisk. The camera angle shifts slow motion, cinematic as the studio audience stirs, their expressions caught somewhere between disbelief and morbid curiosity. This isn't The View anymore. This is a collision course between ideology, ego, and live broadcast. Whoopi keeps talking, her tone steady, almost righteous, as if daring anyone to challenge her. The words tumble out, trying to build a bridge between pain and outrage, but the more she talks, the thinner that bridge looks. Her co-hosts exchange glances. That's silent TV host code for times. Somebody stop her before this goes viral. Asterisk. But it's too late. The clip is already writing itself into history. 10 seconds, that's all it takes for the conversation to explode beyond the set, beyond the walls, beyond the safety of daytime chatter. Viewers at home stop scrolling. Phones buzz. Hashtags ignite. From the control room, a producer whispers into the headset, "We can't cut this. We're live." The tension in the studio thickens, the kind you can feel even through the screen. Whoopi sits back, confident. But what she doesn't know, what no one in that studio knows yet, is that her words have just summoned a reckoning. Because sitting a few feet away, watching it all unfold with that unshakable calm, is Tyrus. Massive, composed, eyes narrowing just slightly. He's not laughing, he's not shocked, he's waiting. And in the next breath, when it's his turn to speak, the temperature in that room will rise 10 degrees. In less than 10 seconds, a talk show about viewpoints has turned into a national flashpoint, and waiting in the wings, Tyrus, ready to drop the truth like a hammer. The studio heat bites down like a spotlight with teeth. Laughter skims across the surface, light and nervous. The kind you hear when everybody knows a skit is coming but no one can hit the brakes. Whoopi leans in like she owns the table, chin lifted, voice steady enough to pass for calm. She isn't yelling. She doesn't have to. She drops it simple, almost casual, like a cue card line that slips past the censors because it isn't a curse word. Not if you're black. The words don't just land, they echo. A couple heads snap, a host's smile stalls mid-lip, someone in the third row breathes in too fast. Girl, she really said that on live TV? The audience waits for the save, for someone to giggle and say, "Play nice," for the music to swell and drown it out. No music. No save, just a piano wire of silence vibrating between the cameras and the couch. Then the scramble begins. Crosstalk. A voice down the table pushes back, shaky but trying to sound firm. Trying to reset the game. It's different here in 2025 than it is in Iran. You can hear the cue, the "be reasonable" tone. The daytime moderation riff that usually clears a lane out of trouble. Not today. Whoopi doesn't budge. Her fingers flutter, eyes locked, like she's calling her shot on a pool table. She loads another sentence, more fuel on an already hot mic. "If we're going to talk Iran," she says, "let's remember what we've done here." The words speed up, the rhythm tightening. "We've tied people to cars. We've been hanging black people in this country. It's the same," she pushes. That's the play. And that's when the room forgets how to breathe. There's applause, but it isn't applause. It's a reflex. A red light flashing above the camera. A few claps spill out like silverware dropped on tile. The sound dies quick. You can almost hear the studio's heartbeat, a thud in the rafters. Someone coughs into a closed mouth. One host nods out of habit and instantly regrets it. The control room rides the faders like a storm is climbing the boards. Greg mutters something under his breath, the kind of line that makes the floor crew bite their cheeks to stay professional. He opens his mouth, stops, glances down the table. "Girls, girls, girls." The joke hangs there, half smile, half warning, Like a parent trying to break up a fight in a grocery aisle. It buys 2 seconds, not 3. Whoopi doubles down. It's not furious. It's colder than that. It's moral high ground weather. She stacks the words and waits for someone to knock them down so she can call it proof. The camera finds her hands mid-air, the gesture that says, "Don't interrupt me when I'm making a point." She wants the moment to feel historic. It does, just not the way she thinks. The co-host beside her cuts in, voice wobbly from threading a needle on live TV. "Look, murder for differences isn't good. Nobody's saying that." The phrasing trips over itself, trying to soften the edges and only sharpening them. Another voice tries a different door. Feelings versus reality. What you feel doesn't rewrite the facts. The talking turns into traffic. Everyone thinks they have the green light, horns, brakes. Nobody moves. Whoopi's eyes harden. She presses forward like a quarterback who believes the line will hold. She lists the American sins with the certainty of a closing argument. Then she hits the sentence that locks the brakes and throws everyone into the windshield. If we start talking about Iran, we gotta remember, we've been hanging black people in this country. That's the moment the room freezes. Not just quiet, suspension, a glass of water on a dashboard right before it tips. The studio lights feel hotter, like somebody nudged the dimmer the wrong way and maxed it out. The audience doesn't know whether to clap, gasp, or sit on their hands and pray the camera doesn't land on them. A woman in the second row presses her lips together so tight the color drains out. A guy near the aisle shakes his head once, slow, as if he's trying to clear a song stuck in his ear. From the couch, there's a flicker of panic disguised as poise. One host smiles too wide, the network smile, the "I'm fine" smile. Another reaches for a note card that won't help. Greg shifts like he's about to throw a rope, then thinks better, then decides the rope needs a hook. He glances toward the live audience and catches a pair of eyes that say something. The moment resists him. It belongs to Whoopi, and the silence she just carved out of the broadcast. The camera drifts to the crowd, that slow, predatory float that makes every face look like a reaction meme waiting to happen. Murmurs ripple from the back row to the front like wind across wheat. Somewhere a laugh escapes, a single blip, then disappears as quickly as it came. The applause light blinks again. Lonely. A few palms smack together, hesitant, then stall as if they touched a hot stove. In the control room, a producer's voice thins in the headset. "Stay with it, don't cut, let it breathe." Another voice adds, "We can't walk this back, we're live." The director rides the switcher like a drum kit, pushing in, pulling out, looking for a safe angle that doesn't exist. Whoopi holds her posture, righteous, unmoved. She thinks she's planted a flag, but every sentence behind it starts to slide, the ground giving way under the weight of what she's equating. The co-host across from her tries to rebuild the bridge with careful words about context, about differences, about the reality people live with elsewhere. It's like setting toothpicks under a collapsing beam. The room wants a referee. It wants a moment of clarity that doesn't come wrapped in either outrage or laughter. It gets neither. It gets the pause, the big one, the kind that turns a segment into a headline, the kind that can't be edited around. A pause that tells you the conversation has left the rails and is now describing its own arc in the air. And in that suspended space, with the lights too bright and the cameras too honest, there's a shadow at the end of the table. Broad shoulders. Hands folded. Eyes steady. Not grinning. Not burning. Just ready. Tyrus doesn't reach for the mic. He doesn't need to. The moment is wheeling toward him like a slow train. He waits, like a man who knows the truth doesn't need a running start. Whoopi breathes, slow, satisfied. The audience exhales with her, not sure if they're relieved or bracing for impact. The table resets its posture. The show tries to remember its format. The music cue begs to be played. It's a train wreck in slow motion, beautiful in its precision and awful in its inevitability. The next voice to speak will decide whether this turns into smoke or thunder. Somewhere, faint but growing, you can feel the temperature lift. Greg doesn't rush in. He lets the silence stretch, the kind of long pause that feels like a held breath before the punchline lands. The corners of his mouth twitch, but his eyes stay sharp, scanning the wreckage of the last 5 minutes. Then, with the calm precision of a man who knows exactly where to aim, he leans toward his mic and says, "Girls, girls, girls." His voice slides across the room like a smirk in sound form. A few chuckles bubble up, nervous, grateful, relieved to have something to grab onto. Greg straightens, blinking in disbelief, as though he's been hit with déjà vu from a bad dream. Whoopi, even the fake Republican sitting next to you couldn't back that mess up. The audience breaks. The laughter spills over, not quite free, but desperate to escape. You can hear the tension, releasing like steam through a crack. He doesn't stop there. He never does. I haven't seen Whoopi wave her fingers like that since someone offered her a salad, he adds, a sly grin curling into the corner of his mouth. The timing is ruthless, half a beat late, just long enough for the absurdity to sink in before detonating. The laughter now is real, but it's not kind. It's the kind that bruises. Whoopi shifts in her seat, eyes narrowing, lips pressed tight. She's still holding on to that moral stance, but it's crumbling under the weight of Greg's precision sarcasm. Whoopi, he continues, the mock concern creeping in. You know you're on the wrong side of history when even the audience doesn't know whether to clap or call security. The camera pans to the crowd, catching awkward smiles, a few people clapping too hard, others staring down at their laps as if avoiding eye contact could save them from guilt by proximity. Greg glances toward the control room, mock whispering into the mic. Is the applause sign broken? Or are we all just stunned into silence? The crowd laughs again, louder this time, some clapping, some booing. It's chaos that somehow feels orchestrated. He looks back at Whoopi, pretending to analyze her expression. That face right there, he says, gesturing with his hand, that's the face of someone who just realized the applause was for the wrong reason. Someone on the panel tries to step in, maybe to rescue the tone, maybe to steer it back to civility, but Greg cuts through it like static. Hold up, he says, raising one finger. We gotta unpack this for a second. You're telling me that living as a black millionaire in America on national television, no less, is somehow equivalent to being a woman under a regime that literally stones people in the streets? He laughs, short and dry. Whoopi, come on, that's not a comparison. That's a cry for better writers. The studio roars. It's the kind of laugh that's half admiration, half disbelief. The audience loves a verbal brawl, and Greg gives it to them with style. He keeps the rhythm tight, bouncing between humor and reality, sarcasm and truth, like a boxer dancing between jabs and hooks. You know, he says, leaning back, it's like watching someone argue with a ghost. No one said Iran was perfect. Whoopi. But last I checked, nobody here's getting tossed off buildings for what they believe. Unless you count Twitter. The crowd howls. Even the camera operators are shaking. The irony isn't lost on anyone. The absurdity of Whoopi's claim is too big to ignore. Greg rides the laughter, then softens just enough to twist the knife. See, here's the thing, he says, voice dipping low. You're not fighting for justice anymore. You're just fighting to sound right. And there's a big difference. That lands harder than any punchline. The laughter fades, leaving a thin thread of silence again. Whoopi shifts, her expression flickering between defiance and discomfort. Greg doesn't gloat. He doesn't need to. The truth is already doing the work for him. Alyssa leans forward, trying to lighten it up. I mean, she laughs nervously. She was like, we in this country tie people to cars. Speak for yourself, girl. The crowd cracks up again, this time easier. Greg jumps on it, playful but lethal. Yeah, speak for yourself, he echoes. The rest of us just drive them to brunch. The laughter erupts again, wave after wave, the tension melting into amusement. He waits for it to die down, then goes in for one last swing. Look, he says, tone half sincere, half teasing, you can't just pull history off the shelf every time your argument runs out of gas. That's not activism, that's improv. Another round of laughter, followed by the unmistakable buzz of live TV adrenaline. Greg smirks, tapping the desk lightly. Next time, Whoopi, maybe skip the comparison, stick to the salad. The camera catches her expression, a tight, polite smile that doesn't reach her eyes. The audience cheers anyway. Some because they agree, others because they can't believe what they're witnessing. The air feels lighter now, but under that laughter sits a quiet sting. Greg's humor cuts deep because it's true. He's turned outrage into entertainment, turned discomfort into applause. And yet, as the laughter fades, a flicker of unease lingers. It's in the way. Whoopi's gaze drifts away from the crowd, in the way Greg exhales like he knows the real fight hasn't even started. Beneath the jokes and the one-liners, the truth hums, steady and low. Her words didn't just miss the mark, they drew a target. And from the end of the table, Tyrus is already lining up the shot. The camera finds him like it's been waiting all night, a slow pan, a deliberate drift, and there he is at the end of the table, Tyrus, massive, stoic, unreadable. He doesn't lean forward. He doesn't fidget. He sits like a mountain you either climb or go around, and tonight there's nowhere else to go. The energy changes. You can feel it in the air, a low hum turning into a pulse. Even the laughter from Greg's last hit fades like a ringtone. Someone finally answered. Tyrus lifts the mic just enough to let everyone know it's his turn now. No drum roll, no grand setup, just that voice, cool and unhurried. First off, he says, deadpan, for all the people I've tied to cars, I never asked about their sexuality. The line lands with a wicked thud of surprise. The crowd cracks, a ripple of laughter breaking across the studio. The tension eases, not gone, but softer at the edges. He glances sideways, eyes glinting. Very progressive of me, happy Pride Month. The audience laughs harder, catching the rhythm, grateful for a moment that doesn't feel like walking a tightrope over open flame. Then, the tone shifts. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. He drops it lower, heavier. Listen, he says, hands quiet on the desk, shoulders squared like a brick wall. You live in a country where you can say dumb sh times T on TV and still have a job tomorrow. That's called opportunity. You can feel the room recalibrate. The cameras tighten. The laughter dies down, replaced by something harder, something that sits in the chest and doesn't move. He locks eyes with the panel, not to challenge, but to hold the space. Only in America, he continues, can a black person sit on a TV show, paid millions, have the floor, interrupt people, talk over them, then tell us all that living here is the same as being under a regime that stones women in the street. He doesn't spit the words. He lays them down one by one, like bricks in a path he expects everyone to walk. That interruption you just did, in Iran, that gets you stoned. That's the difference. That's the part you don't get. The camera cuts to Whoopi, slow and clinical. A flicker passes across her face, a split second of discomfort that fights its way back into composure. She sits still, but it's the stillness of someone who just felt the floor tilt. The shot shifts to the audience, heads nodding, others staring at the stage as if the furniture rearranged itself while they were blinking. Tyrus doesn't chase the reaction, he keeps going. You might feel a certain way, he says, rolling the words like a weight he's lifted before. And feelings are real, but they don't rewrite reality. Here's reality. In this country, even after you say something reckless, you get tomorrow. You get a chance to fix it. You get the grace to come back, to try again. That's not oppression. That's the opposite. A low murmur runs through the crowd. Not a laugh, not a gasp, more like a collective exhale, finding shape. Tyrus tilts his head, the tiniest nod to the audience as if to say, stay with me. Black, white, gay, straight, short, tall, everybody catches something, he says. The cadence steady. Old school, clean. That's life, but the beauty of this place is the shot you get to be better, to do better, even when you don't deserve it, especially when you don't. He glances toward Greg, quick, light, an inside joke passing through a serious moment. I tried to talk last segment, he says, half smiling, and as soon as they heard Tyrus, folks were like, I'm gonna make a phone call. The room laughs, softer now, intimate. Greg plays the straight man, nodding, a small grin. How'd that make you feel? He asks. Tyrus doesn't miss a beat. Very black, Greg. Laughter swells and breaks, the tension vented just enough to keep the room from snapping. He looks back down the table, the smile is gone. Play the race card somewhere else, he says evenly. It don't work here. Not in America. Not when you have a mic, a platform, and a paycheck. Not when the rest of us are out here actually trying to build something. He taps the desk with one finger, a quiet metronome. That card doesn't buy what you think it buys. Not anymore. The camera holds on Whoopi again. Another faint shift, the expression tightening. Tyrus doesn't press her by name. He doesn't have to. He's speaking to the whole moment, the entire idea that feeling wronged can stand in for being right. There's a difference, he says, between fighting to make things better and fighting to make yourself feel better. One changes the world, the other just changes your tone. He leans back, not in retreat but in command, owning the stillness. "You want to talk about history?" he says. "We can talk about it all day, but dragging history into every argument like a prop ain't justice. It's theater, and you don't fix real life by pretending." The audience is with him now, quiet, intent, leaning forward. He turns the point again, careful, deliberate. "Comparisons like that," he says, "they're not just wrong. They erase people living that reality somewhere else. People who don't get to speak their minds without looking over their shoulders. People who don't get tomorrow." He lets that hang. No music, no applause light, just the weight of it. Then, the final climb. The room feels tighter, as if every seat rose an inch to get closer. Tyrus breathes in once and sets the hammer where it needs to fall. "Shame on you," he says, voice still level. "Shame on you for acting like America hasn't given you every damn chance to succeed." The words ring, like steel on steel. The first clap is instinctive, then the second, then a rush applause slamming into the set like weather. The sound gathers and swells until it's its own storm, a wall of noise that makes the cameras tremble and the host table vibrate under folded hands. He doesn't smile at the ovation, he lets it move past him. He waits until it peaks, until the cheering turns back into breath. Then he gives the coda, the line that seals the scene and leaves nothing loose. "This," he says, a nod around the studio. "This right here, the light, the seat, the chance to talk wild and still come back tomorrow. That's America." He lifts his chin once, a verdict rendered. "Respect it." The crowd surges again, a second wave, louder than the first, rolling from the back row to the front. The camera cuts between faces lit with relief, with recognition, with that specific gratitude people feel when someone says the thing that needed saying and doesn't flinch. The shot returns to Whoopi for a beat, eyes cool, mouth firm. The kind of look that reveals very little and explains even less. Then back to Tyrus, unbothered, composed, hands folded on the desk like the lesson is finished. He never raised his voice. He never broke a sweat. He didn't mock. He taught. And in teaching, he took the airless, angry heat of the moment and turned it into daylight. The storm that broke wasn't fury, it was applause. The room settles, chairs creak, headsets crackle, and for the first time all night the show feels like it has a center of gravity. Tyrus sits in it, steady as a courthouse, waiting for the next question like a man who already knows the answer. The applause rolls back like a tide and leaves the floor shining. The heat that just cracked the room cools by a few degrees. Nobody is laughing now. Nobody is reaching for the easy joke. The studio carries that hush you hear in church after the choir sits down. Greg leans off his elbows, hands open, as if to show he isn't holding a punchline. The cameras ease in closer. The show exhales. A voice from the panel clears the air with something simple and hard. "We've hit a point where feelings matter more than facts, and that's dangerous." It isn't tossed like a grenade, it's placed like a cornerstone. The sentence sits there, square and heavy, and the table forms around it. Heads tilt. Eyes drop to the desk, then lift again. The audience doesn't cheer. They listen. You can feel the sound in the room thin out until it's just breath and lights and the tiny click of a lens focusing. The words find their rhythm. Slower now, careful. "How it feels to be you matters," the commentator adds, voice low, even. But it doesn't define reality. It can't. Because once feelings outrun facts, everything turns into theater. The line floats, then lands. People in the back row nod like they've been waiting all night for someone to say it without dressing it up. Tyrus doesn't jump in. He lets the thought finish its echo. He looks down the table and then out to the seats like a coach after a championship. Not giddy, just certain. When he speaks, it's that same steady cadence, the gravity still on his side. "You might feel oppressed," he says, each word clean, "but here's the truth. You got opportunity. That's what makes America different." No spike, no taunt, just a rule set on the whiteboard. A few hands come together, a small flutter of applause that rises and falls before it can turn into noise. The show shifts again. The lights feel less like interrogation and more like daylight. Greg folds his hands, the comedian gone, the anchor in his chair. He gives the thought back to the table, careful not to break its surface. "So we agree," he says, looking around. "Feelings are real, but facts are the ground." You slip if you pretend they're the same. A co-host, the one who kept trying to set a soft landing earlier, nods with her lips pressed together, then lets out a quiet, reluctant yes. It isn't surrender, it's recognition. The camera drifts across the audience, faces open, unsmiling, drawn forward as if the stage has become a window, and something worth seeing is finally on the other side. A woman in the middle row takes off her glasses and rubs the bridge of her nose like she's peeling away a headache. A man near the aisle leans in with his forearms on his knees, eyes on Tyrus. No blinking, just focus. Tyrus keeps building, one beam at a time. Look, he says, nobody's saying it's perfect. Everybody catches something. But this is the only place where messing up on Monday can turn into doing better on Tuesday, on the same stage, with the same mic. That's opportunity, that's the difference. The truth of it hums. Not a thrill, more like a tuning fork ringing in the rafters. The commentator who started the reset nods once, slow. We've made the discharge of emotion the goal, he says, picking up his own thread. And when you do that, nothing changes except the volume. The facts don't move. He lets the last word hang like a note. Facts. It sounds almost old-fashioned in the glow of 1,000 opinions. It sounds like a floor you can stand on. Whoopi sits very still. The camera glances across her face and finds control, not collapse. She isn't nodding. She isn't scowling. She wears the kind of calm that is either composure or calculation. It doesn't matter which. What matters is the shift in the room. The electricity has reset, from roasting to reckoning. Nobody is asking for a dunk. They want a precedent. Greg turns to Tyrus like he's inviting a closing argument. Tyrus accepts without ceremony. You said what you said, he offers, toward the table. Not a name, not a point of the finger. And you'll be back tomorrow. That alone tells you everything about where you live. Try that in Tehran. The line is blunt, not barbed. The audience doesn't clap. They absorb. A soft laugh bubbles up from somewhere, but it dies an inch out of the throat. The show won't let itself drift back to banter. Not yet. There's a solemnity to the moment now, a recognition that the mess turned meaningful, that the segment crawled out of the meme and into a mirror. People are seeing themselves, not just their side. The commentator finishes the thought he started, almost whispering into the steadiness. We've got to get back to objective reality. Feelings are valid, they just can't be sovereign. The sentence lands like a verdict without a gavel. Across the panel, reluctant nods follow, small at first, then clearer, like agreement returning to a room that had forgotten how to host it. Tyrus sets the last piece. Opportunity doesn't cancel pain, he says, voice softer now, but it gives pain a way out. That's what counts. He folds his hands again and lets the silence do what it's supposed to do, cool the heat, clear the view, make room for understanding. The audience doesn't cheer. They breathe. For a beat, the entire stage feels weightless. No one jockeys for the last word. No one reaches for a clever tag. Even the producer in the control room holds the music cue like a bird in the hand. The show has stumbled into something rare for live TV stillness with a point. Greg breaks it carefully, like stepping off a curb you can't see in the dark. So we're here, he says, letting his tone carry a little warmth. In the only country where the wrong words can get challenged on air, in real time, without a knock on the door afterward. That's not nothing. It's not applause he gets back. It's the quieter sound of agreement, the one that lives in nods and thoughtful faces, and people sitting up a little straighter. The camera widens. The table is a single shape again, not four corners competing for light. The audience looks different because the show looks different, less like a squabble, more like a town square. Someone claps once, lightly, then stops, embarrassed. It doesn't need clapping, it needs to sink in. And it does. You can see it happen, one row at a time, brows smoothing, shoulders dropping. A collective yes that isn't about sides, but about sanity. The segment has turned itself inside out. The outrage that came in loud has gone quiet, and in its place sits something heavier, less glamorous, more useful. Respect. Not for a person, not even for a position, but for the ground everyone has to stand on if they want to build anything at all. Greg looks down the table and gives the smallest nod, like passing the baton to whoever wants to close. No one rushes. Tyrus doesn't move. He's said enough. The commentator who named the problem lets his hands fall open on the desk as if to show the audience the empty palms where the outrage used to be. The room holds, then releases, like a long muscle finally unclenching. What's left is the quiet kind of clarity you don't tweet. The studio lights seem softer now, as if they adjusted to the truth without anyone touching a dial. When the music finally comes in, it comes in low, respectful, almost apologetic for being music at all. The show has found its footing again, not because somebody won the argument, but because the facts walked back in and asked for a seat. The quiet sits for one long, heavy heartbeat before Greg leans back in his chair with that half smile, the kind that means he's about to cross the line and act like it's just another Tuesday. The crowd senses it, that spark of mischief flickering back to life. "You know," he says, pausing just long enough for every camera to find him, "the irony of Whoopi defending Iran? She was probably stoned." The punchline detonates. The studio erupts into laughter, loud, grateful, messy. After a full minute of moral gravity, the audience needed this release, and Greg delivers it like a bartender topping off a strong drink. The table shakes from the laughter. Even the floor crew can't hide their smiles behind the cameras. The tension that hung like smoke is gone, blown away by Greg's irreverent wind. He glances at Whoopi's empty seat on the screen behind him, just a still frame now, her frozen expression, an unintentional reaction shot for the ages. "She clearly has the munchies all the time," Greg continues, rolling the moment. "And honestly, who could blame her? That show's exhausting." Alyssa covers her mouth, failing to hide the giggle that slips through. "Greg!" she gasps, but it's too late, the audience is already roaring again. Someone from the back shouts, "Don't stop!" And Greg throws his hands up in mock surrender. "Hey, I'm just saying," he laughs. "When your show starts to sound like a therapy session hosted by confusion itself, you might want to pass the snacks." The panel joins in now, overlapping quips like jazz players riffing on the same beat. "I think the hair deserves its own union," one voice says. At this point, the View should come with a warning label. Another adds. Greg chuckles, shaking his head. "The View is chaos," with subtitles. He says, deadpan. The laughter hits another crest, filling every corner of the studio until the soundboards blink red. Through the laughter, there's still something grounding in the air, an undercurrent of what's just been said. Beneath the jokes, beneath the tease, the message is still sitting there, calm and undeniable. Truth cuts through emotion every time. The difference between feelings and facts doesn't vanish just because the jokes came back. It stands taller now, anchored by everything that's been said tonight. Greg turns slightly in his chair, the smirk softening into something more sincere. "Don't worry, America," he says, eyes straight into the camera. "I watch The View so you don't have to." The crowd howls, clapping and whistling, the line hitting like a curtain call. The sound swells, but it's warm this time, not angry, not tense, just the kind of noise that says, asterisk, we got it, asterisk. The camera widens. The panel's laughing now, shoulders loose, the weight lifted, lights flare off the desk, gold and forgiving. Tyrus sits back, calm again, the giant at peace after the storm. His voice slides in one last time, low and certain, riding just above the applause. "Opportunity," he says, not loud but enough to be heard. "That's the real View." Greg nods once, as if that line sealed the night. The laughter fades into applause, the applause folds into cheers, and the show signs off in a glow of catharsis, humor, truth, and a little redemption. The final frame holds just long enough to catch the quiet between claps, that moment of clarity that always follows a storm well weathered. Then the lights dim, the credits roll, and somewhere in America, someone watching nods at the screen and whispers, "He's right."